It's long since been debated in the Scream community who killed who in the 1996 movie. Whether Billy or Stu killed Casey and Steve, who actually killed Tatum in the garage, among others. So my goal today is to finally settle the debate on this topic and put an end to the suffering amongst Scream fans, finally answering the age-old question, who killed who, Billy or Stu? Maureen Prescott. This one's a pretty easy one. Maureen Prescott, Sydney's mother, the whole driving force of Sydney's character, besides the fact that she's being stalked by this guy, is that her mother was murdered by who she thinks was Cotton Weary. Cotton was sent to jail for the murder of Maureen, being falsely accused and framed so that it looked like he was the one to commit the crime. In reality, if it even needed saying out loud, it was Billy and Stu that took out Sydney's mom, not Cotton. As to who delivered the killing blow, I'm not sure. I suppose it could have been either of them. Perhaps it's easier to lean towards it being Billy as the one who delivered the final stab. That's the name of the movie in the movie. But in reality, I don't think we'll ever know. I'm gonna go ahead and label this kill as both Billy and Stu's, as no Maureen death scene was ever shot, and none of the characters disclose what really happened the day Maureen died. If you wanted to really pin it down to one person, you'd be better off going with Billy, as he was the one with the motive, and I doubt that he'd allow Stu to take that away from him. Now, Casey and Steve are tricky ones, and perhaps the most debated on this entire list, as some of the other ones are pretty obvious. Most people believe it was either Billy and Stu that killed Casey, or just Stu on his own, but there are a couple of clues that suggest otherwise. During the fountain scene, we're told by Tatum that Stu was with her the night of the murder. Stu had an alibi, and Tatum was pretty confident about his whereabouts. We also know in the scene where the killer first calls Sydney that Tatum says Casey and Steve didn't die until after 10 PM. Assuming that Tatum saying Stu was with her means that he stayed the night, then it would surely be pretty hard to believe that Stu snuck out during the night to go and murder Casey and Steve with Billy. It's possible, sure, but there's a lot of coordination that would need to happen for that to happen. I mean, an insane amount of coordination, and a ton of luck relying on Tatum not waking up after Stu leaves. Billy is portrayed as the main Ghostface killer, while Stu takes a backseat as his accomplice, making sense that he'd be the one to get the opening kill. Billy was also completely free to head over to Casey and Steve's house after or before visiting Sydney for a short while that same night. I'm not sure if that scene takes place after or before Casey's death, but I'm assuming it's afterwards. I've always assumed it was after, as everything in the movie is in chronological order, but it's something that I thought about before doing this. It had my brain going for a little bit. Despite everything I just said, it is up in the air with a lot of Scream fans as to whether or not Stu was there with him. I'm going to assume his "thanks buddy" remark to Billy at the fountain after Billy said "nobody said you did" in response to Stu saying "I didn't kill anybody" was an underhanded way of saying thanks for killing Casey for me. But with all of that being said, Kevin Williamson himself has confirmed that Stu was the one that killed Casey, so I think it would be okay to assume that both Billy and Stu did the opening kill together, and wouldn't reunite as killers again until the end of the movie where we see them unmasked. Going with this, the fountain scene could have been a way to convey Stu's unhinged personality compared to Billy's calm and collected nature, contrasting the two killers that would later be revealed as the ones behind everything. Stu struggles to hide how much he enjoys what he's doing, and Billy, while not amazing at it, conveys his enjoyment in much more subtle ways. My opinion on this whole thing though is that Billy killed Casey and Stu gutted Steve. Now before I explain this, there's a video I found of the cast from Scream talking about this exact who killed Casey Becker question, and so I'll play that for you now.
We did the 20th anniversary with Kevin Williamson, and that question came up, who killed who in the movie? We don't know. So whenever Kevin didn't even know. Yeah. The writer didn't even know. So if you want to believe something in your heart, you go for it, Jeremy. Hold that shit tight. I think we should ask you who killed Casey.
A lot of people think Stu killed Casey.
I think it took both of us to get her in the tree, though.
Maybe Stu was closer than Billy, but...
She had it coming.
According to Skeet and Matthew, they don't know. Believe what you want and hold it tight. So with that being said, I'm going to cuddle my theory of Casey and Steve being killed by Billy and Stu pretty tightly. I believe they were both present. I think it was Billy on the phone, and each of them were covering the doors to Casey's home. When Ghostface asks, "What door am I at?" it's a lose-lose question. These guys are known for using lose-lose questions. Case in point, at the end of the movie, they literally tell Sydney, "We ask you a question, you get it wrong, you die. You get it right, you die. These guys are lose-lose connoisseurs. You can take that as a literal statement too if you want to. The killer that catches up to Casey also acts exactly like Billy too. From my point of view, Wes directed it in such a way where it can be interpreted as Billy in the costume. He gave each killer unique traits. Billy holds the knife with one hand, raising it over his shoulder, and Stu holds it with both hands, raising it above his head. This is how we know that Stu was going to kill Randy, and then ultimately ended up killing Kenny, and that Billy was the one who ended up killing Casey. I think that either of them would have killed Casey, to be honest. Maybe Stu intended to kill her, but Billy was just conveniently the one who caught up to her after she started running away from her house. I'm not sure, as none of that was even touched upon while making the movie, I don't think, and all of that is down to fan interpretation, but it's fun to theorize. As for Stu, it's safe to assume that he gutted Steve, considering how much he goes on about gutting people at the fountain with the rest of the main characters. He waffles on about how only a big strong man could do that, and goes on to give an in-depth description of how he gutted Steve, or how they both gutted Casey, before Billy steps in and stops him from saying too much. Stu clearly loved attention, and was looking for some sort of ego boost here at the fountain, and in my opinion, I think this was all done on purpose by Wes to give you little breadcrumb hints as to who the killers were right off the bat, even if they're so small that you'd probably only pick them up on a rewatch. So with all of this being said, I'm gonna go ahead and say that Stu gutted Steve, Billy killed Casey, and then they both gutted and hung her from the tree. Principal Himbry. Now, this one's a pretty clear one, and most people agree that this kill was Billy Loomis. Around the time this kill would have happened, Stu was likely inviting people to come to his party, as we see him doing with Tatum and Sydney in this scene here. Billy's whereabouts are unknown for this portion of the movie, so we're left to assume that Billy undertook the tedious task of not only killing Himbry in the school, but also waiting it out until the staff had gone home so that he could drag his body to the football field and hang him up, giving the kids at Stu's party something to leave over later in the final act of the movie. Now that I'm doing this video, I'm only now realizing how little death is in this movie. Everything happens for a reason, and everyone who dies, dies for a reason. No one unnecessarily dies, everything drives the plot forwards, and I think that's one of the more subtle reasons I like this movie. It's such a common horror thing, or slasher thing, I suppose, to have killers just mow down nameless victims that have no effect on the plot whatsoever. Them dying doesn't affect anything, whereas in the original Scream movie, there's none of that whatsoever. Every death drives the plot somehow, something I thought about while writing this. Anyways, Principal Himbry's death goes to Billy, as does the next one, Tatum Riley. It's rare to see someone theorizing that somehow Stu killed Tatum, but people making that point do show up. I think it's a pretty widely accepted fact that Billy killed Tatum after killing and hanging Himbry, but before he knocks on Stu's door. Billy sneaks in through the garage after arriving to the party late because he was hanging up Himbry's body and crushes Tatum in the garage door. He then stashes the costume somewhere and knocks on the door, making it appear as though he's just arrived. He gives Stu an affirming look before entering his house, and to most people, me included, we would have taken this as a signal that the job is done when it comes to killing Tatum. Tatum was in the way for most of the movie, always in Sydney's ear, and the killers would probably have noticed this pretty early on, and they would have at least talked over a few different ways of killing her off. She never would have left the party without Sydney, and they knew that. She had to go. She was killed with pretty precise coordination too. Stu asks her to go and grab him another beer, and where's the beer? The garage. Where's Billy? The garage. Billy kills Tatum, adding another kill into Billy's column. Now, Kenny Brown. The final Ghostface kill of the movie comes from Stu Marker, as it quite literally could not be Billy here because, yeah, that's probably got something to do with it. I feel like Billy being in the costume here would have just been about the stupidest thing they could have done. By some chance, if someone like Randy or Dewey had wandered into the room Billy and Sydney were, cuddling in, they would have found an empty room. Billy needed to play dead here in order to keep his whole facade up. He was done doing Ghostface work by this point, and it was up to Stu to do it all from this point forwards. Stu had done it before this point, as we already know with the Casey and Steve scene, and also the Sydney attack scene earlier in the movie where Stu is hiding in the closet, but this was the only other time that we see him get an on-screen kill. Stu sprints up to the news van, hides behind the door, and slices Kenny as soon as he makes himself vulnerable. He does this, and then fails to catch Sydney pretty miserably right afterwards too. Another hint that it's Stu here would be in the way he jingles the keys right in front of Sydney's face when she's in the cop car, something of a more playful nature that I could 100% see Stu's Ghostface doing, as opposed to Billy's. It's just a small thing I noticed, but something nonetheless, and something is better than nothing. So who killed who? Billy or Stu? Well, according to my notes, not including the first bonus kill, Maureen, it goes Stu, Billy, 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 no, not not that Billy. Okay, yeah, that's the one. And then Stu for the final kill, tallying up to 3 kills for Billy and 2 for Stu. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, you could definitely say that Billy was the one to deliver the killing blow to Maureen, considering his whole motive for even donning the Ghostface alias was because of her, but I'm not going to officially count it as it's all done off screen and we'll never know for sure. Anyways, that's the end of the video, and according to my analytics, only 7% of you are subscribed, so if you're feeling good and you want to boost the channel, drop a sub and engage in some way, even if that's a dislike, it's okay, I'll allow it. Anyways, thanks for watching everyone, and I'll catch you all in the next one.